Good afternoon, everyone. This is Greg Walker from CABA. We can start the meeting now. I just started the recording. We'll post it on the website for those that are unable to attend. And I got several people looking for the recording after the fact. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Connected Home Council webinar. And I'll briefly go over the agenda, and then after we do a quick keynote presentation, there'll be the standard CHC meeting. So today we have on the agenda the keynote presentation on AI and the connected home, moderated by Jim Hunter from Delos, and then we have Harry Pascarella and Michael Levy from Harbor Research, who will be giving the presentation on AI and the connected home in general, and then also mention a little bit about a research project that we're doing on the same topic that will be starting in a couple of weeks, but mainly on the topic of AI and the connected home. Then after that, we'll go into the standard CHC meeting, and all are welcome to stay for the rest of the duration of the meeting. We'll go over the role of the CHC, some administrative work, approving the past minutes, an update of some of the research that we're doing on the CHC on the topic of AI and the connected home, and then Ken Wax will give an update on some of the white papers that are under development and a couple that are close to completion. Then we'll have some new business, and then an adjournment. And Eric Harper couldn't make the call today, so I'll be chairing that CHC portion of the meeting. With that, I'll pass it off to Jim and Harry and Michael. I saw just join the call for the keynote presentation.
Great, thank you, Greg. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to another really intriguing conversation, presentation around AI and the connected home. Quick description of what you guys are going to hear. As mentioned by Greg, Harry and Michael have joined us. Harry Pascarella and Michael Levy are both from Harbor Research, and they're going to be discussing several areas of AI related to the connected home. Topics include, but not limited to, platforms and virtual agents, use case analysis, voice recognition and smart speakers, predictive analytics and maintenance, barriers towards adoption, data management, ownership, cybersecurity and privacy, value proposition for stakeholders, ethical and legal implications, energy savings, post-COVID opportunities, etc. Again, we have 30 to 40 minutes for this, so they're apparently going to speak really quickly because there's a lot to cover there. And if you have questions, make sure you jot those down, because we'll have a little bit of Q&A at the end as well, to field any kind of questions you guys have. A little background on the folks who'll be presenting. Harry's a storyteller at heart. He is a growth strategist by trade. As the VP at Harbor Research, he's responsible for managing engagements and working with some of the biggest technology and heavy equipment companies in the world. In addition, he manages internal research and consulting activities. He excels at contextualizing the critical but granular details with an eye for the big picture, and has a particular talent for finding connections between disparate data points and uncovering the deeper implications for clients' growth strategy development and business planning. Harry received his Bachelor of Arts degree in economics from the University of Colorado at Boulder, where he graduated summa cum laude. He is passionate about the economic and social impacts of connected devices, systems, people, and processes. We have a lot in common. And Michael, who will also be joining him, is a project manager and consultant at Harbor Research, where he leads research and consulting projects that focus on emerging technologies, such as time-sensitive networking, EV charging, machine learning, and virtual reality. Prior to Harbor, Michael worked for a mid-sized consultancy in Washington, D.C. that primarily focused on healthcare and public sectors. Michael graduated from Northwestern University with a double major degree in English literature and German. If anybody has any questions, again, make sure you make note of those so that we can leverage those later to dig into more information. But with that, I'll hand it off to Harry and Michael. Go ahead, guys.
Great. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, everybody, for joining. As I said, we'll try and keep this between the 20 and 30-minute mark, so there's time for discussion at the end, but we'll see how it goes. Just so I know, who's controlling the slides? so I can speak to you directly when we need to move?
Oh, that's me, Greg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Awesome. All right. So at a high level, when we think about the smart and connected home, we like to look back all the way to when electronics and electromechanical devices first entered the home in the form of relatively simple domestic appliances, and how that's evolved over time. We've come a long way since then, and I think some of the more recent major developments include these smart speakers or smart home hubs that we'll talk a little bit more about later on in the presentation. But through this evolution, there's been a number of value mechanisms that companies and innovators have focused on trying to enable for people. So things around comfort and convenience and safety and security were probably the genesis of much of the smart home technology that's led up until this point. But increasingly, we're seeing kind of a shift towards also including values around resource management and health and wellness. And I think that this speaks to somewhat of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the home. And really what we're seeing is all of these new devices and systems coming together to help enable these values. And many of these devices and systems enable multiple of these values. But a lot of these things are relatively disparate today. And so we'll talk a little bit more as we head through this about, what all of this means, how this will evolve to be more interconnected, and how AI might help drive that forward. Greg, next slide. We've done a number of research projects with CABA over the years. A couple of the portrayals that we'll show today draw from the Connected Home Roadmap work back from 2019. It helps set a good kind of high-level evolution picture of all of this. But to start, before we look at that picture, as part of this and the other landmark research projects, there's an extensive survey that fed into this Connected Home Roadmap work. One of the questions that we like to ask in these surveys is kind of what drives the adoption of new technology, and in this case, connected home products. And the 4 categories highlighted at the top there are very telling. Cost savings being number 1, reliability number 2, improved comfort and convenience, and ease of use 3 and 4. And we think that this is telling because ultimately, of course, consumers like to see kind of that cost savings come out. That's where the things like research management, energy management, water management, those kinds of things come into play. But reliability, improved comfort and convenience, and ease of use tells us that there's an aspect of value and use of these systems. These things, consumers want to adopt new technology in the home to support not just kind of ambiguous or fun or entertainment topics, as much as they would like to see real value in that comfort and convenience realm, reliability, or so on. And so we think that this is important because ultimately some of these values or adoption drivers, if you will, would tell us that things like smart TVs and audio and visual is all great and helpful. But where's that real value? Can we really improve consumer comfort and convenience? Can we really improve kind of how things happen in the home to the extent that consumers will actually adopt these new technologies throughout the home? On the next page, we've highlighted some of the applications here, and I think we're still kind of relatively simple today and what can be done. And this is not necessarily a picture of what's possible, more so what's being adopted for the most part. And we would consider, all of these blue dots to be examples of relatively simple applications, relying on maybe a single device or maybe two devices, or in the case of something like security, obviously there's multiple interconnected devices, but all aimed at the same end state. What we haven't quite gotten to yet are more complex and integrated use cases, such as fall and accident detection, person-specific routines and environmental preferences, and things that kind of automatically change based on the user and the environment, and putting all of these different data streams and devices together to create a custom experience for a consumer in the home. I guess we would see, lack of device interoperability and data sharing as being the key inhibitors of all of this. But there's another inhibitor that we'll talk more about later, which is the ability for these systems to collect data and make decisions on their own about what that data means based on what we've trained these systems to do, or what the systems have trained themselves to do. And until we are able to integrate all of these devices and share data and actually analyze that data in real time, we'll be kind of hampered in the ability to get to some of the more complex use cases that really might drive comfort and convenience, that really might result in me not having to change the temperature when it gets colder outside, but knowing that weather is heading a certain direction, their temperature is heading a certain direction, and for these systems to change themselves accordingly. On the next page, with that context, this is kind of one of the key graphics that we had developed in the Connected Home Roadmap work, which tried to look at, short-term, medium-term, and longer-term, how will this connected home develop? And what are the ecosystem technology and customer considerations along the way? We'll mainly touch on ecosystem and technology in the coming slides, because I think that there's a lot more to be said about consumers and how they're evolving, and a lot of dynamics occurring both around the pandemic and the shift to remote work and work from home and so on. That will definitely be picking up and addressing in the project itself, but want to make sure that the ecosystem and technology dimensions are addressed here. So from an ecosystem standpoint, there's many different ecosystems of devices today. I can go adopt a bunch of Amazon connected devices. I can go adopt a bunch of Google or Apple Home connected devices. Some of these devices can be integrated into multiple systems, but we're still relatively siloed, and we'll get into that here a little bit more in a slide or two. The evolution of this, though, is really towards much more interoperable and interconnected systems, which requires players and suppliers to work together to do this. We see that as kind of a key barrier or key hurdle that needs to be crossed in order to kind of drive us into the future of the connected home. On the technology side, again, as we were kind of describing, there's a lot of very simple or point applications that are occurring in the home today associated with these smart and connected devices. Just as the ecosystem needs to become much more interconnected and work together, so too do the devices and systems in the home. And so as that happens, and as you're able to share more data within and across these types of systems, you need something that is able to process that data and actually do something with that data. That's where artificial intelligence comes in. And so there's these kind of technology hurdles as well. The kind of evolution in the ecosystem and the evolution in the technology really need to match up to enable more of these complex, interconnected kind of applications in the home. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about ecosystems here. So as I was saying, a lot of these ecosystems are developing around these smart home hubs, some of you might have seen this picture before as well. There's many different types of devices that can be smart or connected in the home. There's been this trend towards using these devices such as the Amazon Echo or the Google Home device to help kind of control and interact with the devices in the home through something other than a myriad of apps. So while you can still have different applications, you can still have individual controls for specific devices in the home. These kind of home hubs have really evolved towards the point where they're kind of a central interaction point, and many of them are now relying on voice recognition technology, which has its own kind of artificial intelligence inherent in that itself, and we'll talk more about that as well. But what really this means is that we're trying to drive towards this interoperability, but still kind of in this hub and spoke model, which we would kind of describe as maybe a stepping stone to the future. You need sort of a way to interact with all of these devices for sure, but I think the true value comes when you shift from these more intuitive interactions, like being able to speak to a device, as opposed to taking out my phone or my tablet and clicking on an app and going to the right navigation screen and then controlling something. I can just speak to a device and it makes things work the way I want them to. It's a more of an intuitive interaction, but I think the real value comes when you shift from those intuitive interactions to actually no interaction at all. And these devices and systems are learning from what you do and are able to then put that back into play by controlling themselves, or based on your actions, the control happens itself. What this requires, though, on the next slide is a shift in how we think about ecosystems. And I think we're already kind of shifting towards this walled garden mode from a more of a dictator model, where the larger companies like Amazon and Google and Apple have kind of sat at the central point of these ecosystems, controlling how and when things are able to interact with each other, and really kind of just controlling the narrative with regards to what's available to consumers and what they might want to use. So, if I already kind of have an Amazon Alexa device in my home, I'm going to want to adopt other smart home devices that I can integrate with that. Otherwise, it's do I need to adopt a whole other platform to help control my devices or systems? And so what's kind of transforming out of that is this kind of walled garden model, where I have an Amazon Alexa, and therefore I adopt Amazon Alexa's specific devices, or I'm kind of I'd rather use HomeKit, so I do the same with HomeKit or Google or Honeywell or whatever it is. And what ends up happening is these are still quite disparate ecosystems, especially when there's only certain devices that I can get for that integrate with a certain kind of central hub. And so what's really required is this evolution towards more of a mesh ecosystem. And so while there still are control points in this mesh ecosystem, it implies a much more interoperable a set of devices and technologies, where it's not just a central point of control or interaction necessarily, but an interconnected kind of web of communicating devices and applications. And so there might be multiple hubs and multiple suppliers kind of interrelated together in those ecosystems, all driving kind of various values based on what I, as the consumer, might want to see. And so we're not quite there yet. I think that there's kind of inklings of us getting closer to that ecosystem model, the mesh ecosystem model. But it necessarily implies not only an evolution in how technology suppliers think about their position in the connected home market, but also kind of a necessary evolution in technologies and more of a coordination of technologies to help enable it. So this brings us to the evolution of AI. Yeah, so next slide. Artificial intelligence as a topic and an idea has been around for quite a while. We would say that we're currently in a third evolution of AI, but kind of what started all the way back with the Turing test, kind of towards the end of the Second World War and into the 50s, kind of has evolved a few times into kind of the current state, where we've had a renewed sense of value in what artificial intelligence technologies are able to do. And this evolution is important because there's only so much you can do with typical regression and classification type of artificial intelligence and analytics technologies. This needs to be able to evolve towards much more kind of deeper, unsupervised learning to really gain the true value out of this. The next slide details kind of how this evolution occurs, or kind of where we're at in all of this, and the different types of technologies or I'd say processes that artificial intelligence can take. But really what we're talking about is evolving towards much more automated learning and action from that learning. And so things working without necessarily needing to be controlled. They're collecting data and able to act on that data intuitively based on what they've been trained to do or what they are training themselves to do. And so today we're kind of in this stage, which is quite evolved into this convolutional neural networks. And there's a lot that can be said about each of these stages of technology development. But convolutional neural networks are really good at analyzing images and matching up those images with other sorts of images that they've been trained to identify. So very good at kind of monitoring behavior and understanding what, say, behaviors are, or being able to understand a cat when it sees a cat, or a hot dog when it sees a hot dog, right? So there's certain applications that can be provided through convolutional neural networks and mostly enabled by kind of video and image recognition. As that evolves to more recurrent neural networks, which includes things like natural language processing, as I was describing before with home hubs, being able to understand certain sequences of what's happening. There's a temporal context to recurrent neural networks that allows the system to understand, the sequence of things that in one way it means one thing, and in another way it could mean a completely different thing or mean nothing at all. And that's what recurrent neural networks are great at kind of understanding. And then kind of eventually on to much more advanced deep reinforcement learning, where the actual system itself can teach itself and learn from the experiences and act on those experiences. And so as you evolve through this progression, much more value can be enabled, and that can be done in the form of those much more personalized experiences that just happen. So it's the difference between, I can set my coffee maker to automatically turn on at 7 a.m. every morning, but what if I have to wake up at 5:30 one morning and I would like coffee right when I wake up? How will it know that? Well, there might be certain actions that I take the night before, whether it's setting my alarm to a certain time or whatever that might be, that tells the coffee maker, hey, I should start a little earlier tomorrow. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about that should happen automatically in the future of the connected home. So really kind of in practice, what this means, well, there's all this underlying technology. This evolution is occurring towards much more kind of automated and unsupervised analysis of data streams coming from interconnected devices and systems, very complex interactions enabling these very complex applications. So, the example of the coffee maker, there's multiple devices and multiple data streams and multiple systems involved, necessarily multiple suppliers involved in all of that need to be working together, back to those mesh ecosystems. And so it's kind of the evolution of both the supplier base to be, willing and able to work together, the technology to enable that evolution towards more complex analytics, and then putting those things together into a connected home context, which is where all of this is heading. The final, so two more slides. So the I guess the other thing that's occurring at the same time as technology and processes are evolving is the ability to actually develop artificial intelligence applications is becoming a lot more easy and accessible. I'm sure a lot of you have heard kind of low code, no code. It's a pretty buzzy term recently, but it's an important term because it implies that a whole new kind of group of people can create apps. It doesn't just need to be a data scientist or a computer scientist or a highly trained AI ML developer that necessarily needs to be involved to build applications. We're evolving towards a state where a lot of this can be much more plug and play, drag and drop, whatever you want to call it, which opens up many new opportunities and should spur quite a bit more development of artificial intelligence and machine learning applications into the future. And so we're kind of at a inflection point here where the technology is coming together with the ability to develop and expand that technology, as well as kind of suppliers beginning to recognize that kind of interconnectivity and interoperability is important to enabling the true value of these types of systems. And so all of this kind of coming together to enable new applications of artificial intelligence in the connected home that can help kind of get to some of those values that we were describing at the beginning. I'll end the kind of, I guess, research portion of this presentation before I head into the description of the research we're about to embark on with just kind of a summary from that connected home roadmap work. So I think it's very telling that artificial intelligence has quite a big part to play in this future. So, again, with the shift from kind of more hub and spoke ecosystems to much more kind of, mesh or interconnected systems of systems, this will need to occur to really drive the greatest value in the home. And while it can still be kind of centered around a single type of assistant or a single kind of engine to help drive the interaction, there needs to be the ability to interconnect very disparate sets of devices into the same platform. We came up with this idea or through this research of no interface is the best interface. Of course, I like being able to tell Alexa or Google that, hey, can you turn on the lights in my living room? But I would really like that for it to just kind of recognize that it's dark out and recognize that I'm walking into the living room and turn on those lights for me, but not do that in the daytime, because why would I need the lights in the daytime? That's what we have windows and sunshine for. So it's this shift from more of intuitive interactions, which are great, to no interactions where things are just happening around me based on what I would like to have happen, based on what we've trained these different devices to do, based on what they've learned from us doing in these environments along the way, and all of that kind of coming together to enable kind of these automated, custom personalized experiences. And again, all of this necessarily is driven by true interoperability and a kind of communication and connection between devices and systems. So with that kind of brings us to this research that's ahead. So as with many of these landmark research projects, we're trying to get kind of a sense of where the market is at today. So a lot of the views I was showing, while likely still mostly hold true, are from kind of the 2018, 2019 timeframe when we were last kind of conducting this research. So a lot of this needs to be kind of updated and extended. And, there's been a lot of development, especially in the AI realm since then. We kind of want to take another pass at trends and forces, understanding kind of what is happening to help drive new artificial intelligence technologies, as well as new connected home systems and services, how all of that's coming together, how customer needs have changed over the past couple of years, including kind of relative to the pandemic and the resulting kind of new normal that's occurred around more remote work and more people being at home more often. What does that mean for all of these connected home devices, and what is that doing to adoption of these systems? On the next page, we'll also be looking at supplier dynamics and best practices. So understanding what suppliers are doing, what types of applications are they enabling, where has the focus been from a development standpoint to help support customer needs, and how that has shifted, especially kind of with regards to the ecosystem dynamics that we've been talking about throughout this presentation, and then how various stakeholders in the connected home can interact and work together to kind of help drive this forward. So these are the research questions that we'll be covering in this work, among others. And this is kind of the baseline or the jumping off point for the research process here on the next page. So we'll be doing a survey of consumers, trying to get an updated sense of their willingness to adopt, willingness to pay, what types of values they're looking for, how their lives have changed over the past couple of years, and what this implies for connected home technology adoption. We'll also be conducting a round of interviews. We've recently been doing some work on the intelligent building side around the similar topic, more focused on predictive maintenance, but with a significant amount of artificial intelligence in there as well, and have some great interviews that we can pull from that, but also want to do some much more focused interviews on AI and the connected home, and how this is all changing. Once we kind of collect the survey results and have an initial round of interviews, we'll also be going back to some more thought leaders and experts to get their opinions on the data that we found, to kind of understand how they think about kind of the future of the connected home and the intersection with artificial intelligence and what that means, and then wrapping all of that up with an analysis and driving out some recommendations there for key stakeholders. This gives you a better sense of this primary research project. Again, this kind of qualified end customer survey, as well as an in-depth supplier and expert interviews, kind of putting these two pieces together to really understand, both from the consumer side and from the supply side, what's going on, what do consumers need, and how are suppliers organizing to serve them. And then finally, all of this will drive the standard set of outputs here from landmark research projects, which includes kind of regular steering committee meetings, the survey and the results from that survey, as well as the interviews, and then a final report, summary presentation, and webinars to follow. So with that, thank you everybody for the time and attention. Appreciate the opportunity to present with you all. I'd be happy to answer any questions, both about the topic as a whole, as well as the research itself, if anybody has any that they would like to ask.
Harry, first I'd like to thank you and Michael for putting this together. I have some questions, but I'm going to lead off with a really great question from Stephen McDonald, which I agree with and approach every problem with. It's the Simon Sinek view. Why? Why do we need to have the value proposition here. And I'll double this by saying, is AI, and when you do these surveys, are you using the term AI when you ask the questions, or are you asking about use cases that happen to use AI to kind of justify the tool? Because from a technology perspective, are you approaching it from a technology, or are you approaching it from a value proposition perspective? And I think that would help to answer the question of why you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah, no, it's always a great question, and I actually really like, Stephen, the why should my grandma adopt a smart home? What's in it for her? Well, I mean, short answer is it might not be her that wants the smart home. It might be her son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter that wants the smart home, because it's less about her necessarily interacting with all of these smart devices daily, but being able to say monitor her health and safety in the home, and as much as it is for your peace of mind as your son, as her son or daughter in that way. I do think it comes back to understanding the value propositions here, understanding who you're targeting and how you're messaging to those people. And as you described, the way that we kind of construct the survey is to mostly understand kind of what people desire from a use case standpoint. What have they adopted today? What are they missing from what they currently have as a set of smart home devices or systems today? Where they think their experiences could be better. And we may ask them about AI, but AI is not central to those kinds of discussions or to those surveys, because the everyday person might not have a great sense of AI, or might have a visceral reaction to AI based on what they hear in the news, or based on the Terminator movie they saw a decade ago. So we tend to keep kind of the actual, we try and keep the survey more so focused on the values enabled and the use cases enabled by smart home, connected home devices, and the underlying technologies, as opposed to those underlying technologies themselves. However, always important to get a sense of, when people hear artificial intelligence, what do they think? What are they concerned about? What are they excited for? So that kind of thing can be used to gauge and organize messaging and targeting for those types of customers. So the why ends up being pretty different depending on who you are and the context of your experience. And for some people, a smart TV and a set of smart lights, and being able to ask Alexa a few questions about can my dog eat blueberries is enough. But for others, and I think it will be increasing over time, having more kind of intuitive and as we were saying, kind of automatic interactions will continue to evolve to help support lifestyles and what people want to do in the home.
So I've got some follow-ups, and they thread into some of the questions that Walt's putting into the question in the chat session. The first comes down to the actual terminology, right? Everything starts with how, and we know now more than ever, how you say things, how you present things is where, everything's key. First off, when AI was first introduced, and me, like many others on this call, I think we've been attending some of these AI sessions, both in person and virtually, for several years now. And people started to grab that AI name and throw it into their technology descriptions, when in reality, it wasn't anything close to AI. It was at most descriptive analytics or reporting, or maybe some simple scripting, versus what real AI is. The second part of that question comes down to, from a terminology perspective, when you use the word, and this is something I say at every one of these sessions, when you use the word artificial intelligence, isn't that missing the mark of the value proposition in the first place? There's no value in it being artificial, versus AI's assistive intelligence or augmented intelligence, or something that helps make us better human beings.
Sure. No, I think that's a great point, and I think those kinds of terminology choices can really help change the narrative about how people receive kind of the messages that are being put out there in the marketplace. honestly, that's why we kind of stay away from messaging about artificial intelligence. And I think, you'll see a lot of suppliers staying away from those terms in general, is because there are kind of negative connotations to the use of terms like artificial intelligence. So of course, changing those terms can definitely help. But at the end of the day, I don't care what the technology itself necessarily is doing, as long as my privacy and security is maintained, and that at the end of the day, the systems work. If that's magic, great. If that's artificial intelligence, fine. But I care much more about the value I'm receiving from those technologies, as opposed to the underlying technology themselves.
Absolutely agree. I'm going to throw a couple more questions because we've got about 5 minutes left here.
Sure.
Some questions I'm going to summarize from several folks here about the use cases. There's several use cases being asked about and suggested here. One is around the need for indoor air quality and how AI can help there. Wondering if you're going to add that into the survey, as well as use cases around, consuming energy and being able to kind of keep intelligence in the play of optimizing how energy is consumed, keeping alive vampire currents, all this kind of stuff like that. What can be used from that perspective? What kind of use cases are you looking at presenting in the study?
Yeah, no, I think all of those are definitely included. I think actually in some cases, these kinds of resource or energy management applications might be great starting points. Things where I don't necessarily see it happening already, right? So I don't see the electricity coming into my home, but I do see when I'm controlling the lights or the temperature, right? And there is some sense of control over my environment in that way. But with regards to things like energy, or even like air filtration and HV and other things kind of happening kind of in the background, might be great kind of starting points or entry points for artificial intelligence technologies into the home, because I already have no idea what's going on there. So definitely all included, and trying to kind of capture the full set of use cases associated with smart and connected home technologies.
I think several folks in this session, obviously, watching the chat, Walt, as well as probably Stephen, David, some others would actually, I think, love to feed some of their use cases in to help drive the study. And
we'd love to hear about it. We'd love to hear about it. And so, first of all, happy to follow up with folks separately. Greg, I'm not sure if you want to be able to capture the folks that would like to kind of either be interviewed or kind of included in the study itself, but happy to have any and all conversations. And I think that this is a great opportunity for engagement here.
Yeah, if you're interested, you can to getting involved in the study at any capacity, whether be a subject matter expert or fund or anything like that. Email walker@caba.org, and I'll definitely point you in the right direction. Or you can put your comments in the chat box, and I'll try to record those as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide my email as well, Greg, just to make it easier for folks as well. Since a couple more.
Greg, can you say the funding model for this new research? Is it similar to the past?
I'll get into that in the regular CHC meeting, but for sure, yeah, there's different. It's a similar funding model than the previous research is at the sort of $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 level.
Harry, have another question here. This one I'm going to paraphrase from Fred. Basically, we're being slowly boiled by technology and for the purpose of convenience. And we just keep giving up and giving up and giving up our information. And obviously AI is very hungry for data and information. What are the risks and things like that you guys are addressing with regards to as you give this stuff up, or whether you're focusing on things being processed locally so it doesn't get to the cloud? What is your position there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's important to understand folks' concerns and how much weight they place on those concerns relative to any sort of adoption of new technology. We already willingly give away so much information and data knowingly and unknowingly. And so while there are a significant amount of well-justified privacy and security concerns associated with all of this, especially as these devices kind of get into the home and see a lot more of our lives, I think it will be important to understand how you kind of trade off that kind of data and information for additional value, as well as how you might be able to retain control of that data and information into the future. So you might lend it or let these technologies borrow it in the near term, but you still retain control over it. That'll be a key dynamic that we'll try and uncover as we move through this work.
Okay. I think that we're wrapping up. I'll just throw this one thing out that I want everybody to kind of hear. I'm terrified of AI. I think that going down a path that there's no way back right now. But at the end of the day, we just keep remembering some things. And one of the things is for every automatic windshield wiper, for every automatic, headlight, there's a manual override. We need to make sure, as you guys are talking about this, that there's always a manual override and you never give it up completely to the machine.
Of course. We will retain control.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day.
And really fired up the group here. People want to participate, so check out the chat sessions for everybody who's weighing in, and they'll reach out. So thank you so much. Back to you, Greg.
Thanks, Michael, Harry, and Jim as well for moderating the session. And I saw a note in the chat box that we will be sharing the slide deck. It's actually posted on the website at CABA.org/CHC. But all those that are registered, I'll share the slide deck, and there'll be the contact information of Harbor Research and Harry and Michael if you want to reach out as well. So now this brings us to the next part in the meeting, and this is the Connected Home meeting. We'll talk a little bit about the research, probably not very much considering we just talked a lot about that particular research project, but we'll also Ken will talk about some working groups on white papers that you can get engaged in, and some other business as well. So the Connected Home Council was founded back in 2004, and this is a council made up of CABA members, member organizations. There's roughly around 220 individuals on this council, representing about 150 or so different organizations. And it's led by Eric Harper from Snap One, and then we have as the chair, and then we have vice chairs as Brian B. Miller from Semtech, and Jim Hunter, who you just heard, from Delos, and then Charles Hume from Southwire. And we meet quarterly, discuss some of the hot button topics in the industry, what's coming up in terms of typically in non-COVID times events and in the calendar and whatnot. And other working groups that we're working on, and research and white papers, things like that. So the first call of business is really to ask for a call to a motion to pass the minutes from the last meeting, which was on July 8th, 2021. So if I could just have if anyone on the call can I ask for a motion to approve those past minutes?
Here's David. I was on that call. I moved to approve the minutes. David Katz.
All right. Thanks, David. And can we have a seconder?
Yeah, this is Jim. I'll second.
All right. Thanks, Jim. And are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried, and we'll approve those minutes. And then minutes of this meeting will be posted on the website for this on the CABA.org/CHC as well. I'm not going to go too much in depth about this particular agenda item, because we just talked about it during the keynote presentation. But essentially, we do these landmark research projects every year, and we basically select the top 3 topics that are trending, present those to the board of directors, and they selected the Connected Home and AI back in January of this year. And then we put together an RFP and sent it out to a CABA member research firms, and Harbor Research won that RFP, and they were selected by the initial funders. And we have 5 funders on board so far. There's one that's silent, if you're wondering why it doesn't match the 4 logos that are on the screen. And essentially, we're crowdfunding the research project. So we're pooling the money and then giving it to Harbor Research to conduct the research project that we just discussed earlier in the keynote presentation. So it's roughly, we scaled it down a little bit due to the number of funders, but it will be around $50,000 or $60,000 of research at the end of the day, and you can get it for either $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000. So $5,000, you get the research. And more of a pre-buy and participate in a final webinar. At $10,000, you get to be on the steering committee to shape the research and get input on the research and review the final documents, and then get a special webinar just for your organization. And then a new initiative that we're doing is really a post-mortem of the research, a think tank webinar for an hour after the research is all completed. And then there's a $15,000 level where you get a case study incorporated in. We're expected to launch the project in the week of October 11th. We're just waiting for a final date, and we should be communicating that with the funders shortly, probably tomorrow if we can get a date soon. So if you're interested, please contact myself at walker@caba.org, and I can provide you a little bit more information about the research to become a funder, or if you just wanted to participate in the research as a subject matter expert, I can get you in touch with the Harbor team and then have them make the decision if to include you into the research and or any case studies or information that you'd be able to provide. So is there any questions on this particular research project that weren't answered already? I guess with that, I'll pass it off to Ken Wax to give an update on the white paper subcommittee and some of the good work that's being done there.
Well, thank you very much, Greg. The white paper subcommittee has been active almost since the beginning of the Connected Home Council. Our objective is to develop new papers. We do have another part of CABA that reports on papers published elsewhere in the industry. The White Paper Subcommittee at CHC and the Intelligent Buildings Council creates new papers. In progress, we have Part 2, Power over Ethernet and Digital Electricity in Commercial and Multiple Dwelling Residential Buildings. Louis Swow of Sinclair Digital Holdings is the chair of this committee, and you can see the various participants. We have a strong interest in this. It's actually part of a 3-paper series. The first part, Power over Ethernet Basics, was published in 2020. It's available as are all the papers at caba.org/whitepapers. We will be moving ahead with Part 2, where right now we're waiting further updates. The next paper is the benefits of advanced lighting systems on the human experience, otherwise known as human-centric lighting and controls. Christopher Larry of EXP US Services Incorporated is chair and author of this paper, and I'm pleased to announce this paper is completed. I actually did a detailed review this past weekend, and all I found were some minor editorial issues. So this paper is looking good, and it will be in the library shortly. Next, we have the Connected Home Cybersecurity Regulations. This paper is being led by John Devlin of PAID Strategies. He's the lead author in the paper. It's in the early stages at this point, and we look forward to a very useful paper for CABA. So stay tuned. The next topic is a series of papers we've been doing on Li-Fi. This is technology similar to what you're familiar with radio-based Wi-Fi, except the frequency is higher. In fact, the electromagnetic frequency is in the light range. So this is light enabled of fidelity. Basically, visible or infrared light source within a room is modulated to carry data. And the advantage of this is the signal is carried as far as light can be seen, so the light can be contained within a room. So we're working the second of a 3-paper series led by Professor J.B. Groves of Wharton Junior College. He's the author and chair of this paper. The second paper now is completed, and it's posted to the CABA website under published white papers. We completed the final review a few months ago. So that brings us up to date on all the CHC white papers. And as you can see on this website, you can download them at caba.org/whitepapers. Well, that brings us up to date, Greg, and thank you for the opportunity to inform CHC about the progress we're making, as we've been doing since almost the start of CHC in creating useful white papers.
Thanks, Ken. Anyone who's interested in producing a white paper for CABA, these are they're always 10 to 20 pages of secondary research. If you want to author a paper, we contact us, and then we can work out the details. We have a little proposal, 1-pager, and then once it's approved, then we go and find a working group to help assist in the paper. Sometimes authoring sections of the paper, other times they're just working as subject matter experts. But if you wanted to bring forward a topic, author a paper, or get involved in one of the previous working groups, definitely let us know, and we'll make it happen.
We strive to make these papers of general interest to the CHC audience. So if you've got a topic that you'd like to educate your colleagues about, please contact Greg or me.
Thank you. I think well, we're coming up to we have a short CHC meeting today anyway, but I guess we're coming up to the new business section. I guess Byron, if you're on the call, just if you could lead the discussion on any new business that we have, if any.
So you know, the council is always looking for input with good ideas. We saw today a webinar and a review of the white papers. So in addition, you know, any new business, this is the time to bring it up, you know, or if you have suggestions for future webinar, white paper ideas, you know, anything that would coincide with the council's interest, please raise your voice now.
This is David. Given the both US and Canada Build Back Better, potentially large investments in improving homes is being suggested. And I think we might have somebody speak to how best to approach these incentives.
Okay. So how would you, I'm just trying to summarize what that, I guess, category would be called, or topic.
Well, like I'll give you the example. There are people that now that the election's over in Canada, and obviously, hopefully, Mr. Biden gets whatever he has to get to build back better. Given climate change and given resiliency and flooding and energy efficiency that was measured, both the Canadian and US governments are funding major improvements to your home. And so those are things that maybe we could talk about or have somebody explain, or I help people understand those programs. So that's something I suggest might be applicable to the council.
Yeah, excellent. Definitely.
I'll work with Greg on a proposal or something, or a webinar, because it's so pressing.
Yeah, I'll give you a call after this call, David, and we can talk about it. And especially if you know anyone in particular that could speak on this topic or have any other resources, then we could bring these forward in at least in an agenda item at the next meeting. And if it's substantial, then maybe even more of a longer keynote presentation if there's some interest there.
Byron, this is Ken Wax. The local press in New England has had a lot of articles recently about abandoning oil for heating and natural gas for heating, which is prevalent in the Northeast, and replacing it by heat pumps. They're only starting now to address the complications and substantial costs, especially since a lot of heating does not use forced hot air. It uses steam radiators and hot water pumped around baseboard distribution. This is a pretty enormous topic that's getting a lot of press. Maybe we could address the technical side to see how you would take a house that could be up to a century or more old and upgrade the heating plant.
So I guess, Greg, on that, we could look at the members that might be active in that space, you know, heating, those kind of things, and reach out to them to see if they could speak to the topic.
Greg, has this been a similar push in Canada to use heat pumps instead of fossil fuels?
Yes, because we have a big, cheap electric system. But in addition, Ken and others, is that solar thermal is still available, but the weather doesn't lend itself too much to collecting the solar energy from a heat point of view. But there are systems and there are ways of doing it. But the radiators aren't going to go away. They just may be, the water that goes to them or the glycol or whatever might be made renewably, including renewable natural gas, which there's another webinar right now on the food waste being anaerobic digested to create the electricity from waste.
Yeah, and Ken, I can work with you if you know any with maybe a short list of companies to reach out to. This could potentially be a white paper, or it could be just a presentation or something like that at the next council meeting, or at least reaching out to them to see if they have any resources that we can share through our other channels, like the news brief and whatnot.
Well, I guess first thing is to assess how widespread this is throughout US and Canada and how great a need there is.
Yeah.
And is that something that's generally driven on a state by state basis in the US, or is it a federal push?
It's right now, it's not policy at all. There are a few communities in Massachusetts that have actually, one community passed an ordinance outlawing any new gas home heating installations. They got overruled by the state, who said, no, you're not, that's a little too ambitious at this point. But the push is not going away. So I really have not analyzed how widespread this is beyond what I've seen in the major newspaper in Boston. But my guess is it's going to spread throughout the country. And I would expect to see a push in the cold parts of the country, namely the Midwest and the Northeast.
It's definitely here in Canada for sure, the push to go away from gas in homes for sure, but obviously not outlaw it altogether, but really just it's in the plan for in the future.
And by the way, if this does come to pass, I believe that if you run the numbers, you find the load on the electric power grid is much greater to support the abandonment of natural gas than it is even for electric vehicle charging.
Yeah. Well, Quebec has
Potentially
already
very
done pretty
complex
much gone
project.
away with the gas. It's almost all electric in Quebec because of the prices are so cheap.
Well, I
Or-
think that's Quebec is really an unusual situation compared to most of North
For sure.
America. In fact, I think in New England we get somewhere around 12% of our electricity from Quebec, and there is a major intertie in the state of Maine.
And they just signed a $25 billion deal for 25 years with Hydro-Quebec in New York. But let's move on. I think there's an opportunity to look into how we're going to improve our homes, not only from a smart way, but a sustainable way.
Thank you for the suggestions. Yeah, so complex and interesting topic for sure. Anyone else have anything they would like to discuss? Okay, I guess Greg, I'll
Okay. Well, I guess
give it back
we
to you.
can yeah we'll end it there, and I'll touch base with David and Ken on those topics, and I'll announce the next meeting. So the next meeting will be, well, we haven't set a set date yet, but it'll be at the end of November or early December of this year. And this will be the fourth meeting of the CHC for this year. And if there's any interest in providing a keynote presentation, feel free to reach out to myself at walker@caba.org, and then we can make it happen. Or if you want to put something on the agenda going forward, we'll do that as well. And we'll add back to the agenda on some of the upcoming events, because I know events are starting to come up as well, and we'll add some of those in the calendar and in the agenda for the next meeting. But I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and everyone who had their role in presenting, and I'll adjourn the meeting here as the acting chair in replacing Eric. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah.